The day my father's will was read, I didn't walk into that office as a man expecting money. I walked in as a son expecting answers. $40 million. That's what his life was worth on paper. But to me, that day wasn't about numbers. It was about truth. About finding out whether my father, the man who taught me to fight for everything, had left me anything at all. Even just a sign that I still mattered to him. The office was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. Dust floated through the air like slow-motion snow, settling on old law books and mahogany shelves. The smell of paper, ink, and loss filled the room. And as I sat there, staring at the folder in front of the lawyer, my pulse hammered in my ears. Across from me, she sat. Vanessa, my stepmother, my father's second wife. The woman who spent years making sure I knew I didn't belong in the world my father built. She was dressed in black silk, perfectly pressed, perfectly poised, perfectly false. Her lips carried that faint, cutting smile that I'd come to know too well, the kind that wasn't warmth. It was victory, and before the lawyer even opened his mouth, she leaned across the table. Her perfume, sharp and sweet, hit me first. Then came the whisper. "Don't expect a penny, Ethan. Your father and I talked about this. Everything is mine now." The words sliced clean through the air. I froze. My heart didn't just drop. It crashed. For years, Vanessa had treated me like I was an intruder in my own father's home. A polite inconvenience she tolerated only because I shared his last name. Now, sitting there with her painted nails resting casually on the table, she looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Like someone who already knew the ending to the story everyone else was waiting to hear. Beside me sat my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother. A man with steady eyes and a quiet kind of strength. He glanced at me, reading the storm on my face, and gave a slow nod that said, "Hold your ground." Across the room, my mother, Karen, sat stiffly. She didn't belong there legally, but she refused to let me face this moment alone. Her jaw was tight, her eyes blazing. She wasn't there for money. She was there for me. Because she had spent years watching Vanessa's quiet cruelty, those small, cutting moments when she'd make me feel like I was less than nothing. Now, that same cruelty was painted across Vanessa's face like fine art. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and opened the folder. And the world slowed down. Every word he spoke sounded distant, like I was hearing it from the bottom of a well. He talked about legal clauses, revisions, dates, documents signed and notarized. But all I could feel was Vanessa's gaze on me, sharp, unblinking, hungry. She thought she had won, and maybe she had. Because if my father had really given her everything, then what did that make me? Nothing. Just a name left off a page. I stared down at my fists, knuckles pale, trying to remember how to breathe. My father had taught me that strength wasn't about shouting. It was about standing when everyone expected you to fall. So I sat there. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. But inside, I was breaking. My father, Michael Harper, wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a builder. He'd started with nothing and turned it into an empire. Real estate, development, investments, every move he made turned to gold. But what I admired most wasn't his money. It was his will, his refusal to quit. And sitting there in that shadowed office, listening to the echo of his name spoken like a transaction, I couldn't help but wonder if that same will still lived in me, or if he'd taken it with him when he died. Uncle Robert leaned close, his voice low and steady. "Patience, nephew. Your father was a man of principle. Remember that." His words landed like a hand on my shoulder. A small anchor in the rising storm. Vanessa shifted in her chair. Her fingers drummed lightly on the table. When the lawyer began listing the first allocations, charitable donations, small gifts to distant relatives, she barely listened. Her attention was fixed on one thing, the moment when the fortune would be handed to her, and then it started. The California vacation home, hers. The vineyard, hers. The art collection, hers. With every line, her smile deepened. She didn't even try to hide it. Then she leaned forward just enough for her words to reach me. "You should have prepared yourself. You were never meant to be part of this. He wanted me to have it all." It was like hearing the echo of every cruel thing she'd ever said to me, every whisper she'd left in the dark halls of my father's house. She had once told me, "One day it will all be mine. You'll see." And now, maybe she was right. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. My mother's eyes snapped toward Vanessa, fire blazing behind them. But she said nothing. because what could she say? This wasn't her fight anymore. The lawyer continued reading, his tone steady, neutral, unshaken. He flipped through the pages, the rustle of paper loud enough to fill the silence. Then he paused, a small, deliberate pause. Vanessa tilted her head, expecting more praise in the form of property and assets. I saw the flicker of arrogance cross her face, the certainty that she had won, but then the lawyer cleared his throat. "Before I continue," he said slowly, "I want to remind everyone that this will was updated 3 months before Mr. Harper's passing. Every clause here reflects his final personal wishes." The air shifted. Vanessa's smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes flickered. Just for a moment, and that moment gave me hope. 3 months. 3 months before he died. That was long after his last surgery, long after he'd started reconnecting with me again. He had called me out of the blue one evening, asked how my job search was going. It wasn't a long conversation, but it meant something. It was the first time in years that he'd sounded like my dad again. Could it be that he'd changed his mind? Vanessa crossed her legs and leaned back in her chair, pretending to be calm, but I saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers stopped tapping, the way her confidence began to crack. The lawyer continued reading, and as his voice filled the room again, I realized that this wasn't just about money, it was about legacy, about what kind of man my father truly was, beneath the business, beneath the pride, beneath the shadow of the woman who thought she owned him. My father had taught me that every man leaves something behind, not just buildings or bank accounts, but choices. And the question that hung heavy in that moment was, what had he chosen? Vanessa's breathing grew shallow. She was still trying to look composed, but her fingers twitched slightly against the armrest. She wasn't used to uncertainty. She wasn't used to waiting. She was used to winning. The lawyer flipped another page. His voice grew quieter, slower, as if the words themselves carried weight. I leaned forward, my pulse rising again. My mother glanced toward me, her hand hovering near mine. Uncle Robert's gaze stayed fixed on the lawyer's mouth, reading every syllable like it might explode. Outside, a faint rumble of thunder rolled through the sky. It felt poetic somehow, the world holding its breath for whatever was about to come next. Because in that moment, between one breath and the next, everything could change. Every fortune, every relationship, every truth, all waiting for the next line. The lawyer's hand hovered over the page. Vanessa's smile froze in place. My chest tightened, and when he finally spoke again, the room fell completely silent, not a cough, not a breath, not a sound, because what came next wasn't what anyone in that room expected to hear. And as the words left the lawyer's mouth, Vanessa's face changed. The confidence vanished. The smile died. Her eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. Enough for me to see it. Enough for me to finally breathe. For years, she had controlled every room she entered, but not this one. Not anymore. Something had shifted. Something big, and though I didn't yet know what my father had done, I knew, in that heartbeat, that he hadn't forgotten me. He had left something behind, something powerful, something that would rewrite everything. Vanessa's hand trembled against the polished wood table. My mother leaned forward, eyes locked on the lawyer. Uncle Robert exhaled slowly, a faint smile ghosting across his face, as if he'd known all along. And me? I just sat there, my pulse thundering, waiting for the rest of the words to fall, because whatever came next was going to change everything. And deep down, I could feel it. This was only the beginning. The moment the lawyer looked up from the papers and cleared his throat, the world seemed to stop. The hum of the air conditioner, the creak of the leather chairs, even the sound of my own heartbeat, everything faded until there was only silence. That silence wasn't empty. It was charged, heavy, alive with tension so thick you could almost taste it, and in that stillness I felt her eyes on me. Vanessa, her smile, a thin, poisonous curve that had haunted my childhood, was back. The kind of smile that didn't just look smug. It fed on control. She leaned forward just slightly, her perfume creeping across the table, and whispered words that burned their way into my chest. "Do you see now? He chose me. He trusted me, not you. You were just his practice family. And now, it's my turn to carry his name." For a heartbeat, I forgot to breathe. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. Every syllable slithered through the air like venom, finding its mark and sinking deep. My fists curled under the table. My pulse hammered. I wanted to shout, to throw every buried memory, every quiet humiliation she'd forced me to swallow, right back at her. But then, a hand, firm, steady, grounding, Uncle Robert's. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. His words came low, calm, a whisper meant only for me. Hold yourself together, Ethan. Your father was not blind. Those 6 words. They cut through the storm like a blade. My father was not blind. I felt something shift inside me, because he wasn't. My father, Michael Harper, was a man who could read a person's soul by the way they shook his hand. He had once told me, "Wealth reveals character, son. The moment money's on the line, you'll see who someone really is." And maybe this was the moment he'd meant. The lawyer's voice continued, steady and emotionless, listing off accounts, stock portfolios, corporate holdings. Each word felt like a hammer. Each sentence another nail in the coffin of hope I'd been clinging to. Across the table, Vanessa's breathing grew light and rhythmic, almost satisfied, like she was listening to a melody written just for her. Every line Daniel read was another verse of her victory song. Until she leaned back, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and said aloud, her voice smooth, cold, confident, "I told you, Ethan, your father trusted me with everything. You should find peace in that. He knew you were not ready." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see grace or poise. I saw greed, a hunger so deep it had hollowed her out from the inside. My mother's hands tightened around her purse, the leather creaking softly. She wanted to fight back, I could see it, the fury burning in her eyes, but she stayed silent. She knew this wasn't her battlefield. It was mine. Uncle Robert kept his hand on my arm. Solid. Unshakable. That's when I understood why he'd come. He hadn't come for money. He came because he knew Vanessa would twist the knife every chance she got. He came to make sure I didn't fall apart before the truth had a chance to come out, because this wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was judgment. My father's final word on who I was and who she had pretended to be. The lawyer shifted slightly in his seat. His eyes flicked down to the last page of the folder. And for the first time since the reading began, something changed. A tightening around his mouth, a subtle furrow of his brow, and Vanessa, sharp, observant, always on guard, noticed it instantly. Her smile faltered. Barely. But it was there, a single crack in her perfect mask. I sat straighter. My pulse quickened. Something was coming. Something big. For the first time since I'd walked into that office, hope sparked in my chest. The air grew heavy again. Every sound vanished into the background. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. I could feel every second stretching, bending like time itself was waiting for what came next. Vanessa crossed her legs, her fingers brushing over the smooth surface of the table. Her expression stayed calm, but her eyes darted toward the lawyer's hand as he turned that final page. And that's when I made my choice. Whether I got nothing or everything, I wouldn't crumble. I wouldn't give her what she wanted, because my father's last lesson to me had been clear as glass. I could still hear his voice, firm, patient, steady, echoing from years ago. "The world will look for ways to humiliate you, Ethan. Don't hand it to them. Stand tall, even if you're standing with nothing." I uncrossed my arms, sat upright, met Vanessa's gaze, and when she saw that I wasn't breaking, that I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of watching me fall, something flickered in her expression. Annoyance. Maybe even fear. For the first time that day, she looked uncertain. Uncle Robert leaned close and whispered, "That's it. Don't let her win before you've even heard the last word." And then, the lawyer spoke. "To my wife, Vanessa Harper, I leave the household we shared, along with a lifetime allowance of $160,000 annually, to be distributed from the estate's trust." The sound hit the room like a lightning strike. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, Vanessa's smile froze. Her hand resting on the chair tightened until her knuckles went white. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her lips parted. But no sound came out. That number, $160,000, hung in the air like an accusation. She had been expecting millions, tens of millions. But a yearly allowance? It was a humiliation dressed as generosity, a cage built out of comfort. Her face went pale, the faintest tremor rippling through her jaw. She tried to compose herself, smoothing her hair, forcing a faint laugh that cracked halfway through. But it was too late. The mask had broken. For years, she had thrived on control, on appearances, on power. But in that instant, she looked small, fragile, human. The lawyer paused, giving the words time to sink in. I felt the world tilt. My mother's eyes gleamed, not with greed, but with recognition, like she had known deep down that my father would never let Vanessa win. Uncle Robert gave my shoulder a squeeze, a quiet, knowing gesture that said, "Now you see." Then Vanessa's voice, sharp, brittle, cracking at the edges, cut through the silence. "This cannot be right," she said. "My husband would never limit me to an allowance. He trusted me with everything." The lawyer didn't flinch, didn't blink. His voice stayed professional, level. "Mrs. Harper, I assure you, these are Mr. Harper's final instructions, signed and witnessed 3 months prior to his passing." 3 months. The same window of time my father had reconnected with me. Vanessa's laugh came out brittle, desperate. Of course. I'm certain the bulk of the estate is still addressed to me. Michael always said he wanted me to be secure. But her words didn't match her eyes. Her confidence was unraveling, thread by thread. I could feel the air shifting. For years she had told me I was nothing, that she was everything. But as her foundation cracked beneath her, I realized she was never strong. She was just loud. And so, for the first time in my life, I didn't hide. I leaned forward, my voice calm but clear. "Funny, Vanessa," I said. "I don't recall my father ever saying he built his empire for you. He built it for his family." Her head snapped toward me. Her eyes flared with fury. "You think you know what he wanted?" She spat. "You were a child when he made his decisions. You don't understand the man he became." I didn't blink, didn't look away. "I know the man who raised me," I said quietly, "and he never turned his back on his son." The lawyer cleared his throat, cutting through the tension. But the damage was already done. Vanessa was no longer untouchable. For years, she'd built her power on my silence. But in that single exchange, I took it back. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, scanning the last lines of the document. His tone changed. Slower, heavier, deliberate. Every heartbeat in the room synchronized. Every breath felt louder. Vanessa leaned forward, her fingers digging into her palms. Her confidence had melted away, leaving only fear. My mother reached for my hand, her touch steady and warm. Uncle Robert's expression softened into something almost proud. And me? I was ready. The lawyer took a long breath. Looked up. "The entirety of my estate," he began, "including all real estate holdings, business shares, investments, and assets totaling $40 million. He paused. The room was silent. "I leave in full and permanent ownership to my only son, Ethan Harper." The sound of his voice broke through the air like thunder. For a moment, I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't believe. The words hung there, echoing in my mind. My only son, Ethan Harper. Vanessa's chair screeched against the floor as she lurched forward. "What?" she gasped. "That cannot be right. There must be a mistake." The lawyer lowered the page slowly, his eyes meeting hers with calm certainty. No mistake, no misunderstanding, just truth. Finally, undeniably, mine. Vanessa's face drained of color. Her lips trembled. She turned toward me, eyes wild, like she was searching for something. Mercy, maybe. But all she found was me. Silent, composed. And for the first time in my life, I was the one who didn't flinch. The room pulsed with electricity, $40 million. Everything my father had built. Every piece of the empire she thought she owned, all of it. Mine. But as Vanessa's world began to crumble, I realized something even more powerful than money had changed in that room. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten son. I wasn't the boy she'd mocked or the shadow in my father's story. I was his legacy, and deep down I knew. My father had been watching this moment from the start. The question now wasn't what I had inherited, but what I was going to do with it. Because power, as my father always said, reveals who you really are. And this was only the beginning. Imagine sitting in a room so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. Every tick of the clock feels like a hammer striking your chest. Your father's will is being read, and your stepmother, the woman who spent years trying to erase you, sits across the table wearing that same smug smile she's always used to remind you that you don't belong. But this time, something feels different. This isn't just another family argument. This is the moment everything changes. because what's about to be read, those few pages lying on the polished oak table, will decide who your father truly trusted, who he believed in and who he left behind, and when the truth comes out, it will shatter everything. The lawyer's voice was steady, almost mechanical, as he read through the legal jargon that had already filled the room for over an hour. Vanessa, my stepmother, sat perfectly still, her manicured nails resting on the table, a picture of calm confidence. To anyone else, she looked composed. But to me, that smile was a weapon. I'd seen it 1,000 times. Every curve of her lips whispered the same cruel message: "You will never be enough." I could still feel my mother's eyes on me from across the table. She didn't need to say a word. That quiet look said everything. No matter what happens, you are not alone. But Vanessa wouldn't let me breathe. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her voice a venomous whisper. "Do you see now?" she hissed. "He chose me. He trusted me, not you. You were just his practice family. Now it's my turn to carry his name." Her words cut through me like glass. Every insult she'd ever thrown, every smirk, every whisper came crashing back at once. I wanted to shout, to fight back, to tell her she was wrong. But before I could even move, I felt a hand grip my arm, firm. "Steady, Uncle Robert." He didn't say much, just leaned in close and murmured, "Hold yourself together. Ethan, your father was not blind." Those words hit me harder than anything Vanessa could ever say. My father was not blind. He had always told me that wealth reveals true character, that when money is on the line, people show you who they really are. Maybe this was exactly what he meant. Still, every minute dragged like an eternity. The lawyer kept reading. Investments, properties, corporate holdings. Vanessa's breathing grew softer, almost like she was savoring every number, every mention of another asset that she believed would be hers. To her, this wasn't grief. It was victory, but then something shifted. The lawyer paused. His expression changed, just a flicker. A tightening around his mouth, a brief glance in my direction, and I saw it. So did she. Vanessa's smile faltered. For the first time that morning, she looked unsure. My heart thudded against my ribs. Could it be? Could my father have actually left me something? Or had I already given myself false hope? Her voice from years ago echoed in my head. He doesn't trust you. He knows you're weak. But deep inside, something began to harden. I straightened in my chair. I remembered my father's voice from when I was just a teenager, broken after a failed exam. He had looked at me and said, "Ethan, the world will look for ways to humiliate you. Don't hand it to them. Stand tall, even if you're standing with nothing." And so I did. I uncrossed my arms, met Vanessa's gaze head on, and refused to look away. Her smirk twitched. She noticed it, the small rebellion, the refusal to fold. Uncle Robert leaned in again. "That's it. Don't let her win before you've even heard the last word." The lawyer turned to the final section of the page. His voice was calm but carried the kind of weight that could end worlds. "To my wife, Vanessa Harper," he read, "I leave the household we shared, along with a lifetime allowance of $160,000 annually, to be distributed from the estate's trust." The words landed like thunder. Vanessa froze. Her eyes widened. Her hand gripped the chair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She had expected millions. Not a yearly allowance smaller than a single month of my father's income. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, with visible effort, she tried to compose herself. "Of course," she stammered. "Of course. I'm sure the bulk of the estate is still addressed to me. Michael always said he wanted me to be secure." The lawyer's eyes flicked toward me. Then slowly he turned the page. My pulse raced. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes sharp with anticipation. Uncle Robert's hand tightened on my shoulder. Something big was coming. Vanessa's voice broke through the quiet, sharp and brittle. "This cannot be right. My husband would never limit me to an allowance." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, unfazed. "Mrs. Harper, I assure you, these are Mr. Harper's final instructions. Signed and witnessed 3 months before his passing." Her jaw clenched. "No!" she snapped. "There must be some mistake. He promised me security. He told me I would carry his legacy." Uncle Robert's tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a satisfaction that couldn't be hidden. "Michael was a man of clarity, Vanessa. If this is what he wrote, this is what he meant. He trusted his son." Her head snapped toward me. Her eyes blazed. "You think you deserve this? You were barely around. He told me things, Ethan. He said you weren't ready. He said you lacked his discipline." I didn't flinch. Not this time. I took a deep breath, my voice steady. Maybe he doubted me once, but in the end, he trusted me. That was his choice, not yours. Her hands trembled. You manipulated him. That's the only explanation. But the lawyer didn't let her spiral. His voice cut through her denial like steel. There are no conditions, Mrs. Harper. The estate belongs entirely to Mr. Ethan Harper. Those were your husband's explicit instructions. The color drained from her face. It was over. Her perfect mask, the one she'd worn for years, shattered. She pressed her hand to her forehead, shaking her head in disbelief. This cannot be happening. And inside me, something shifted. For the first time in years, I felt free. For years, I'd lived under her shadow, her manipulation, her cruelty. But in that moment, I saw the truth written in black and white. My father had believed in me all along. This wasn't about money. It was about trust, about legacy. Uncle Robert gave me a nod, proud, approving. My mother's eyes glistened as she whispered, "He believed in you all along." Vanessa's voice cracked again, desperate now. "I'll challenge this. I'll take it to court. You can't just hand everything to him." The lawyer remained composed. "You are entitled to pursue legal action, Mrs. Harper, but this will is airtight." "Your husband made sure of it." Her rage twisted into venom. "You think you've won, Ethan?" "Money won't make you strong. You'll fail. And when you do, you'll wish you had me." That was the last straw. I stood up, and when I spoke, my voice didn't shake. "No, Vanessa, I don't need your guidance. My father believed in me. That's more powerful than anything you could ever take away." She froze. Her face went pale, her lips trembling, and for the first time she had no reply. The lawyer closed the folder. That concludes the reading of the will. His words carried more weight than any judgment I had ever heard, because they didn't just end a reading, they ended her reign. As I stood there, I realized the inheritance wasn't about the $40 million. It was about vindication, about truth. Vanessa sat silent, hollow, her fury collapsing inward. My mother stood beside me. Uncle Robert rested a proud hand on my shoulder. I turned to Vanessa one last time. "You were right about one thing," I said quietly. "He made a choice, but it wasn't the one you wanted. He showed who he truly trusted, and it wasn't you." Her eyes burned with hatred, but her silence was louder than any threat. I walked out, and as the office doors closed behind me, I breathed deeply, freely, for the first time in years. Outside, the world felt different, the air sharper, the sky wider. My father's legacy wasn't just wealth. It was a reminder of who I truly was, not the boy Vanessa tried to break, but the man my father raised. That night, as I sat alone in my room surrounded by the estate documents, the numbers felt surreal. $40 million, multiple companies, properties, but none of it felt like victory. It felt like responsibility. My father hadn't given me these things for comfort. He'd left them as a challenge, test of whether I could rise to the man he believed I could be, and I intended to prove him right. The next week, I visited his grave. The wind was cold, carrying the faint scent of pine. I stood there for a long time before finally speaking. "You trusted me, Dad. I won't waste it. I'll honor what you built. I'll make you proud." The words hung in the air, a promise. And as I turned to leave, I realized something powerful. People will always try to convince you that you are small, that you don't belong, that you can't stand on your own. But if you believe in yourself, if you remember where you came from, no one can erase you. Vanessa thought she could rewrite my story. But in the end, my father had already written the final line. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of the story at all, because every legacy, every empire needs someone to protect it, and mine had only just begun.